How are you?
Welcome to this presentation.
We're really happy to have this conversation with Benjamín. This project is one of the most amazing projects in the industry. A lot of tech, a lot of knowledge, a lot of science, everything together. So, Ben, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, gentlemen?
We're happy to have you here. And let me introduce you to Ben. Ben is the founder and CEO of Cellibre. Am I pronouncing it right?
Cellibre, yes.
Cellibre,
Yeah.
thank you. A cellular agriculture company that is ushering in the next great industrial revolution by treating biology as a manufacturing technology, turning cells into specialized, sustainable factories for the manufacture of globally significant products at scale. Ben, you formerly worked with Dr. J. Craig Venter and Nobel laureate Dr. Ham Smith as the Vice President of Corporate Development and Strategy at Synthetic Genomics, SGI, where you were responsible for defining, evolving, and implementing SGI's strategy across all of its franchises. And you've also joined Millennium Health as a leading medication solutions company focused on solving the opioid epidemic, where you've led the strategy and corporate development efforts. And prior to this, to joining this industry, Ben had a 9-year tenure on Wall Street, most recently with JP Morgan's healthcare investment banking, and where you executed 20 billion in transactions. Needless to say, Ben earned his MBA from Carnegie Mellon University, Tepper School of Business, and his BS in Mechanical Engineering from Case Western Reserve University. He's also the co-founder of DB Tempus Ventures, Coven Care, and the 32/21 Foundation. Ben, it's an honor to have you here with us today.
Well, it's an honor to be here, and we have great love for our neighbors to the south. And actually, at Synthetic Genomics, I got the honor to work with Mr. Alfonso Romo, who everybody in your country knows well. He's one of the great gentlemen I've had the pleasure of meeting. He was a board member with us at Synthetic Genomics. And interestingly, not many people know this, but one of the best operators in our type of technology and our type of manufacturing actually resides in Mexico City. Alessandro and his team at Fermic are some of the best in the world at fermenting ingredients and fermenting high value products. So it's an honor to be here. I really appreciate you guys having me be part of this great event.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, Ben, you're here today to show us what you're doing at Cellibre.
Yeah, so why don't we hop right into the presentation? Is it up? Can you see it okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so the basis of Cellibre is that if we want to improve, the health of this little rock we live on flying through space called Earth, that we need to fundamentally change how we make things. And energy use, agriculture, and land use are some of the biggest sources of greenhouse gases in the world. And our vision to solve that is actually to ferment the future. And you mentioned this a little bit. We are transforming supply chains by moving traditional chemical manufacture and traditional agriculture into fermentation. And we are able to do this because as I go through the presentation, I want everybody to think about a cell, any cell, one's in your body, one's in the cannabis plant, one's in a flower, as little manufacturing facilities. And biology is the world's most elegant manufacturing technology. The cell wall is shipping and receiving. The nucleus of the cell is the shop foreman. There's a factory floor where we do all of the production. So a cell is nothing more than a manufacturing facility. So what we now have the ability to do is take everything that is going on in a chemical manufacturing facility, or everything that's going on in a farm or in an extraction facility of products that we're trying to make via those methods, and move that entire facility into a microscopic organism called a cell. And then we take those cells and we put them into a fermentation tank, like any brewery you've ever been in for beer or wine, And we feed those cells sugar water, but instead of making beer, they make the product that we care about. So if we think about this in the context of cannabis, the cannabis cell has over 400 different assembly lines in it. That plant takes nutrients from the soil, sunlight, and water, and those nutrients are divided up amongst all these assembly lines. One assembly line makes CBD, one assembly line makes a flavor like limonene, another assembly line makes a euphoric compound like THCV, and there's 400 of these assembly lines. So in the cannabis space, what we're able to do is we're able to take any one of those assembly lines out of the microscopic facility that is the cannabis plant cell and move those into a cell like yeast. So I'm going to go through what the implications are of that and kind of how we do it as we go through. But why cannabis? If we get beyond the obvious ones of this is a massive market and a massive economic opportunity, we're also very excited about the efficacy of the cannabis products, cannabinoids as medicines for everything from pain to epilepsy to even some cancer studies that are becoming very, very interesting. So if we want to do the fermentation of ingredients, we really need to check 4 boxes. One, are we going to produce large volumes? And the answer here is obviously yes. Do we know how to turn basic sugar, which is what we're feeding our cells, into these valuable products? And the answer to that is yes as well. And then does the supply chain actually have issues? Is it worth doing, or is traditional agriculture good enough to actually make these medicines? And as you'll see as we go through, there are some major hurdles for traditional agriculture in the cannabis space because of the natural biology of the plant. And then lastly, is it economically viable? Can we be as good from a cost perspective or better than the plant? And again, this checks that box as well. So this is one of the highlights that I want everybody to take away, is that we believe in the long term at scale, we will be able to make any cannabinoid, CBD, THC, or even those minor cannabinoids that everybody is excited about, for less than $100 a kilogram. That is a step change in the entire industry and in the entire supply chain. So going to big markets, when people think cannabis, and I'm sure you've had a lot of this on today and throughout the week, there's really 2 areas that people look at the most. It's human therapeutics with the likes of GW Pharmaceuticals, who was just acquired for $7 billion, developing approved medicines for specific conditions using cannabinoids. And then there's the adult use market. Our flower that we're smoking, our vape pens, our beverages, our edibles. There's actually a third market that I think might end up being the biggest, and that is animal health and traditional animal agriculture. I'll give you a story. I actually got the chance to talk to a dairy farmer in the state of Florida here in the US. And that dairy farmer, his buddy was feeding his old dog CBD. And that dairy farmer said, I wonder if my cows would feel better if I gave them CBD. And lo and behold, some of the cows that were, off in the pasture, he fed them some CBD, and those cows had lower anxiety and lower pain thresholds to the point where they actually started producing milk again, even though they were decommissioned from the dairy farm. And he ran a small little study and found that when he fed his cows CBD, because they're in tight spaces, they're very anxious, a lot of them are carrying along a lot of weight and have a lot of pain, he actually saw an increase in milk production by supplementing the feed with CBD. So I think the limits of the medicines made by the limits of this plant and the medicines made within it are boundless. I think we are just scratching the surface about what the opportunity is. So the market here, we believe, is closer to $500 billion globally than the markets that you see from others. We think it's much bigger from a volume perspective as well. But the question is, how are these things made today? And there's really 4 ways that they're made. First is synthetically, and we are not doing synthetic cannabinoids. So that's a big takeaway from this. Synthetic cannabinoids are K2 and spice on the illicit markets, a lot of stuff coming from China. And in the regulated markets, a company called Naramco that makes Marinol and some other FDA-approved therapeutics. Those are made synthetically or with chemical production. I don't consider those competitive because in the long run for consumer markets and animal markets, people want natural products. They do not want chemically derived ingredients, but we put them on the page for completeness. In natural products, there are really 3 ways to make it. One is agriculturally. The next one is what we call bioindustrially. Technically, it's called biocatalysis. And the last one is our solution, which is cellular agriculture. Ag and extraction, I think everybody on the call probably knows that. We'll go through it a little bit. Bioindustrial is a little bit of a combination between synthetic production and agricultural production. What they do here is they take natural chemicals and they use enzymes from cells in a vat, kind of like a fermentation tank. And those enzymes or machinery that are biologically based transform those chemicals like a limonene into a CBD. And this works. It's pretty easy science. The problem is the chemical inputs are expensive. The enzymes are expensive. It's really difficult to scale. And if you don't do it right, you could end up with those same synthetic labels. So while the science is easier for bioindustrial and you can get some commercial quickly in the long game, I think you'll see these technologies mainly play in the pharma area where cost of goods is not as much of an issue. So cellular agriculture is what we do, and that is really just moving those assembly lines to a cell and letting the biology do the work, letting nature do the work, meaning instead of a cannabis cell, it's our proprietary cell. So with that, I'll go into agriculture, but did you guys have a question before I hop into these? Or should I keep going?
No, so far it's pretty clear. I mean, it's
Perfect.
very sophisticated, of course, but no, so far it's pretty understandable.
And amazing. What you're telling us is that essentially you're turning non-cannabinoid cells into cannabinoid factories. And
Exactly right. Exactly
okay,
right.
Let me just say this, Ben. We had a talk earlier this morning, and some entrepreneurs, and they said, okay, there is a market in the middle and long run in regards to the primary agricultural facilities and activities. And from what we're hearing today from you, we believe that it might not be in the soil, but rather in a brewing facility where the future of the business of primary agriculture will be. Sorry for the interruption. Please continue.
Yeah,
we are flabbergasted.
Exactly right. You guys are getting it. So what's wrong with the agricultural supply chain for cannabis? Let's walk through that really quickly. This process that I have up is a 3 to 6 month process, meaning you have to plant the seeds, grow the plants, harvest the plants, dry the plants, extract the plants. And then what you end up with at the end is this mixture in an oil. And if you want to go to a further refined product like an isolate or a combination of isolates, you need further processing from there. We know what the inputs are, seeds or clones. Then we go to cultivation. And in the vast majority of the developed world right now, this cultivation is happening indoors. And let me give you guys a stat that is staggering that you probably have not heard before. The legal cannabis industry in North America uses 7 times more energy and resources than the entire pharmaceutical industry combined. Let me repeat that. The legal cannabis industry in North America uses 7 times more energy than the entire pharmaceutical industry. And it's because we're growing these plants in these really sophisticated greenhouses. Well, why would you do that? Well, there's a couple reasons. Number one, it's a tropical plant or an arid plant, depending on which cultivar you're using, whether it's from Asia or from the Middle East and North Africa. And those plants don't tend to grow well on the tundras of the Canadian soil. So they needed to use greenhouses, right? Probably not the optimal place to be producing those plants. But the other piece is more fundamental. The cannabis plant, and more specifically cannabinoid production within the cannabis plant, is very influenced by stresses. Too much water, not enough water, too much heat, not enough heat, too much fertilizer, not enough fertilizer, your microbiome and what kind of microbes you have in the soil, which is what we worked on with Alfonso and his team. All of those things impact the plant. And as a result of that, any little change in environmental conditions can send your THC count from 10% to 15%, from 15 to 20, from 20 back down to 16, not only from crop to crop or plant to plant, but within the same plant itself. And those conditions cause this plant to be very variable. And when we think about the regulatory environment going forward, it is very doubtful that regulators, especially in the US, are going to allow a product to scale that is somewhere between 18 and 29% THC when we're talking about the euphoric compounds. So that variability is inherent to the plant's biology. Then we have to do an extraction from that plant, and these extractions are very complicated. We've gotten really good at it. We continue to get better at it, but you're dealing with plant material, which means chloroplasts and a bunch of oils and a bunch of messy guck that is really difficult to process. And then if you wanted to further refine that to a CBD isolate, in many cases, you have to use technologies like chromatography or, or distillation crystallization that can get very expensive at scale, because remember, you have 400 molecules, a lot of which look very, very similar. It's not a singular molecule that you're taking out of this plant. You have to separate a bunch of them. Lastly, your product is defined by the plant. The product is not defined by you as the innovator or you as the brand. Whatever that plant makes, the plant makes, and you have to deal with that kind of chemistry and therefore experience that you're going to get from that plant, with the downside of there potentially are heavy metals, pesticides. This plant is very susceptible to mold and bacterial contamination, and you hear a lot about people having to get rid of entire crops because they become contaminated. So it's a really inconsistent product. So what we're doing is, again, think about how CBD is made in the cell. It's like any assembly line, and we used a little car manufacturing facility here. And we take that assembly line out of the cannabis plant and we're moving it into our cells. So think about our inputs. So the steel and the wires and everything else is really just sugar water. And then that sugar water inside our cell makes a chassis. And that chassis is then used to make two different parts of the car. And then that part of the car is put together by another machine. These machines in a cell are called enzymes. They're kind of like robots assembling things or people assembling things on an assembly line. And that makes the mother cannabinoid CBG. And then we have one more machine that paints the car. It makes it into CBD or THC or whatever. And all of this happens inside the cell, which is inside the fermentation tank. So what does that mean? Well, what would take you a 5 million square foot grow operation and extraction operation, we do in less than 50,000 square feet. And it's literally simple fermentation like you've seen in any brewery that you've ever been in. And we're going to do this for every single cannabinoid. So we will have a specialized cell not only to make CBD, but to make THC, THCV, CBN, all 100 cannabinoids. And what that means is we're not an isolate company. We can mimic whatever extract you get from the plant, but do so at scale and do so that it's the same exact thing every single time. And your products in China or Mexico or New York City or London give people the same exact experience no matter where they are in the world. At Cellibre, we're building one of the most robust IP portfolios around. We've just recently gotten started, but we're going to pilot scale on our CBG cell. We're currently somewhere between 1 and 1.5 grams per liter. And that metric is important. Grams per liter means how many grams of the product do I make per liter of fermentation every 10 days? Because our instead of 3 to 6 months, we're producing every week on a continuous basis. And as we do this, right now, we're somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 a kilogram on CBG. And that's today after 17 months worth of work. And what you'll see as we move from 1 gram per liter to 3 grams per liter to eventually 20 grams per liter, that is how we drive these costs down to less than 500 and hopefully less than 100 a day, opening up access to these medicines to a great number of innovators and a great number of patients. So this is the pipeline for us. These are the molecules that we're going to be making. And ultimately, we want a better tomorrow for cannabinoid-based medicines and products, more sustainable, moving 2 million square feet to less than 30,000, more accessible today, thousands or tens of thousands of dollars becoming hundreds of dollars for consumers in the future. So everybody has access to these medicines, and more consistent products that are not defined by the plant that's being grown in the ground, but rather defined by the innovators and the brands who create them. So with that, I'll pause, open it up for questions from you guys, and happy to take it any direction that you find helpful.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, we have questions. Of course, we have questions, Ben. And the first question is, where to start? I mean, not the ones that we had prepared. Don't
worry about prepared questions. Let's fly by the seat of our pants.
Yeah, no. Where are you? Where's your facilities right now? I mean, they're not in Mexico by any chance, are they?
Well, I'll tell you what, I would love to work in Mexico. I have a friend actually, pre-pandemic, I spent a lot of time in Tecate. It's one of my favorite towns, and it's obviously very close to us here in San Diego. It's so beautiful and like the best restaurants ever. I don't know why we don't have good Mexican food in San Diego being so close, but I have to go to Tecate to get the real thing. And there are a bunch of industrial parks there that people don't know about on the way from Tijuana to Tecate that I think would be wonderful places to build facilities. But we are going to go contract manufacturing at first. And like I said, The folks at Firmich are one of the best in the world out of Mexico City. I think they're still waiting to see what the Mexican government does from a regulatory perspective. So they're kind of on pause with technologies like ours. But our facilities here in San Diego, we can do up to 10-liter fermentation tanks, which is not production, that's lab scale. But we're currently in talks with, I think, 8 or 9 different organizations to start scaling this up in the back half of this year.
Okay, 10-liter caps. You talked, you used a number from 20 grams per liter to, so in a 10-liter cap, you can produce up to 100.
Forget that one. Ferment can go up to like 100,000 liter fermentation tanks.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about here, right, is we don't talk in grams, we talk in metric tons or kilograms. So our facilities will be able to make tens of thousands of kilograms per annum, and literally in less than 50,000 square feet. You don't need all the arable land, you don't need all of that stuff. And this is why, we want to partner with folks that are on the agricultural side, because we think there's still going to be an absolutely massive market for the flower and plant-based things. But we try and encourage them to take a whole of plant approach. Don't make a plant to make CBD isolate. That's going to be a business that's going to go to zero. Use that plant for what it's great for, making these beautiful combinations of chemistries. The fibers from that plant can be used for so many different things. And by the way, we're looking to partner with plant guys because there's pretty interesting things that our technology can do with the plant as well.
Okay, then there's one of the questions that we prepared, and it is, will a technology like yours completely replace traditional agriculture in this sector? You said no, because there will be a market of course, for the fibers and for the flowers. But let me ask you this. Can this technology of yours be used in other agricultural crops, or is it just cannabis only or cannabis directed technique?
That's a great question, and I want to hit both of them. But the first one on can it be used in other areas? The answer is yes. If you take fish oil supplements, your fish oil does not come from fish. It comes from a vat in the middle of Iowa from a company called Archer's Daniel Midland, or a company called DSM. So this technology is actually used throughout the ingredient supply chain today and has been for decades. The reason that cannabis is so interesting is because the plant provides us an economic floor. Agriculture is pretty cheap. Extraction is pretty cheap. So if you have a product or an agricultural process where you're just pulling one ingredient out, it's going to be really hard for me to compete with you. But when you're growing a plant that makes 400 chemicals, and any one of those chemicals is only a certain percentage of the plant, now I can win. So the natural biology of the cannabis plant is what makes it most interesting for our technology, because we don't have those economic burdens to kind of overcome. But the answer is anything that's made in nature can theoretically be made with this technology. The question is, can it be made economically at the same level or lower than the traditional supplies? There are some exceptions to that. There's a company called Amyris out of the Bay. They are an excellent scientific organization. And their first product was a product called squalene. And squalene is a natural moisturizer. It's used in skincare products. It's used in cosmetics. We used to get that from shark livers. You would have to hunt shark and take it from their liver. Amyris actually charges 3 times more for their product than it would cost to get it from a shark liver. And they have 90% market share, because nobody wants to kill sharks to get a moisturizer. So I think especially in the developed world, cost is becoming a little bit less in some key areas where we're trying to take the total environment and the total impact that we have as humans on our surroundings into account. But the answer is yes, we're going to go into many other areas. And we were in many areas in our prior life at synthetic genomics, but right now, laser focused on cannabinoids. As it relates to getting rid of the plant, I think the plant is always going to exist. I think it's a niche market of somewhere between $50 and $100 billion niche, right? It's a massive, massive market. Here's where our technology gets really cool. There's a company here in San Diego called Perfect Blends. Dean and team have figured out how to infuse the cannabis flower with cannabinoids and terpenes. So what Dean is able to do is take a blend, figure out what the chemistry is, and say, I need a little more THC, or I need a little more CBD, or I want to make a sleep aid, I need CBN. I partner with Dean to make the cannabinoids for him, and he infuses his flower products. So I think that regulatory issue of having very inconsistent products from the plant, we can actually help folks solve that. by having a low-cost ingredient that can then be infused into the flower and make it more consistent and have the same experiences for consumers. So I think there's always going to be a plant market, flower market, and always going to be a plant-derived market. The way to think about it is craft beer, right? There are a ton of craft breweries here in San Diego and down in Tijuana and across the Mexican coast. Then there's Budweiser, right? We're Budweiser. And I think the plants and kind of the craft folks are going to be more of the craft breweries, which, by the way, are massive businesses in massive markets, right? That's kind of the way we think about the bifurcation of the world.
Okay, and another question, and this one's in regards to the regulatory perspective. We're just starting with this legislation and laws thing here in Mexico, but there's Canada, of course, there's the US with each state that has already legalized activities with cannabis, but technically you don't work with cannabis. I mean, you produce cannabinoids, but you're not working with the plant, or are you? That would be the first question. Yeah. And the second question would be, have you found any obstacles in regards to your technology because of this? I mean, the legislation in every country, in every state, is based upon the planting the seed, growing it, sowing it, extracting, and then commercializing. But you just jump all that, and you just produce a cannabinoid, and you can then commercialize it or use it for research. How's that experience been? And the question's a tricky one, because I want to know how to bring your technology to Mexico with regulations that just don't expand to what you're doing.
Yeah, well, interestingly, they will. So there are large tobacco companies that have investments in similar technologies, and I will tell you that we're talking to regulators all the time. So from a regulatory perspective, I'll give you a little interesting anecdotal story. We were trying to get our DEA license and our license to do this properly in the state of California. It took me 4 months with the state of California until they finally said, Ben, you don't need a license for what you're doing. Just go get a DEA license. You don't need a state license. And I responded to them, so you're telling me I can make THC in my lab, but I can't drink out of a plastic straw here in California. That's where we are from a regulatory perspective, right? That's the goofy state that I live in. So we called the DEA and we had a lot of the same problems. They said, Ben, you're not touching the cannabis plant, so you don't fall under the cannabis laws. And actually, many of the things you're making may not even be included in the laws. And we said, guys, we want to tell you what we're doing. We want you to understand it. And I want my license. So it took us 6 months, but we did get a DEA license here in California and in the United States. The other part of it is, here's what's really cool. I can ship cross borders. And by that, I mean, I can't ship THC and CBD, but I can ship my cells, because my cells do not have any CBD or THC until I feed them sugar water. So what we can do from a regulatory perspective is, if there's someone in Canada that wants to be our production partner, we can go to them, put our cells on ice, take it into their fermentation and downstream processing facility, drop our cells in, and we're off to the races. If there's someone in Mexico that wants to build fermentation infrastructure and be our partner in Mexico, we can take our cells, drive them across the border, pop them in, and we could start fermenting these things and culturing them in Mexico, right? So then you think about, okay, Ben, you can do all that. Where does the regulatory go from here? I want you to think about what you said. We have to understand what the seeds are. We have to know where those seeds go. Once those seeds are planted, are they in the right soil? Once the plant grows, has the plant been tested? Now that we've grown the plant, where is that plant going? Is it flower? Is it extraction? If it's extraction, where did it go? What are you extracting it for? Now that you've extracted it, what products is it going into? I have one building. Sugar comes in one end, cannabinoid comes out the other end. Yes. So we don't have any of that tracking or any of those things. And I think regulatory agencies are going to love that about this, because you can lock it all down and you know exactly where everything is and you can track it. But number two, this consistency problem becomes big. When you're dealing with euphoric compounds like ethanol or like THC, regulators want your label to say exactly what it is. And if you come to the United States or you go to Canada and you look at the products, those labels say we're between 19 and 27% THC. Could you imagine if Tecate beer said, our beer's somewhere between 3 and 12% alcohol by volume, have at it, right? It'll never happen. And I think that's why regulators are ultimately going to look on technologies like ours pretty favorably.
You have the system.
Okay, you can ship a factory. Is it too hard to operate? And I'm thinking about this. How hard would it be, for example, to grow, to operate a mini factory at home. Is that a possibility with this technology?
Your cost wouldn't work at home, right?
Okay.
Our costs don't work in our lab at small scale. Biology needs scale. So think about this. We make a couple of tiny cells that you can't see. You need a microscope to see them. And those cells make CBD. What happens with our cells is when we feed them sugar water, not only do they make CBD, they divide. So one cell becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16, 16 becomes 32, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the way to think about our technology. Tim Cook at Apple makes one iPhone and he puts it into a fermentation tank. He drops sugar water on it and it fills up with iPhones, right? That's his manufacturing process. That is our manufacturing process. To make it economical, we need really big fermentation tanks. So you don't want to be doing this at home, it won't be economical, but the bigger the fermentation tank, the lower the cost of goods. And that's why we need scale. That's why we need to have big markets that have a lot of different endpoints, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, of course. And the next question is naturally, what's the minimum viable scale for a factory?
Interestingly, with cannabinoids, especially for minor ones, it's not that big. We need like a 5,000 liter or 10,000 liter fermentation tank, and we are actually economically advantaged to the plant. If you're talking CBD, you probably need to go a little bit bigger. You need to probably go into 20,000 plus liter fermentation tanks and get the scale way up, because CBD and THC are the easiest molecules to extract from the plant. But the minor cannabinoids, like for CBG, for instance, we're going into 500 to 5,000 liter fermentation tanks this year in pilot scale, and we'll be sub $2,000 a kilogram. So we'll be advantaged to the plant in our CBG cells at small scale.
Wow. And an economic question. Yeah. In regards to the cost, the making of the process, where is the biggest cost about using this technology? Is it in the tanks? Is it in the research and development, which apparently you've got it all solved out? Where's the maximum cost? Where does the money go in this factory?
Yeah, we don't want to say we have it all solved, because I would never do that to biology. Nature is a fickle beast. But we're moving at a good pace, and I feel really good about where we are. Most of the cost is in infrastructure. And for us at the beginning, actually 70% of our costs are for contract manufacturing. So these companies have put tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of steel in the ground to build these facilities. To get a return on that, they need to charge me a lot of money. To give you an example, when we go to a contract manufacturer, that $2,000 a kilogram price that I gave you was a contract manufacturing price. If I had my own facility, that would look more like $700. Wow. Literally where we are today, because a vast majority of the cost goes to the contract manufacturer and their infrastructure. So for us in the long term, that the manufacturing facility and the capital infrastructure is what takes you the most. The people side of it actually isn't that bad. It takes basically the same number of people to run a 5,000 liter tank as it does a 100,000 liter tank. It just goes taller, right? You don't need that much more resources there. And remember, our inputs are sugar. So literally we're turning something that's pennies into something that's worth hundreds, thousands, and in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars. So it's really the infrastructure that's the vast majority of the cost.
Okay, we have another of the prepared questions, and I want to take it right now. It is, where do you believe the cannabis market, the cannabis and the cannabinoids market, both of them, because you just introduced a new category. I mean, it's not cannabis because you're not working with cannabis. That's one of the awesomeness of this. So the cannabis and cannabinoid market, where is it going? Not only in the near term, but in the medium to long term, as we start to see globalization and cross-border trade. Is it like any other commodity?
Yeah, so here's what I would say there. So first and foremost, I don't think cannabis is the product for anybody. I think cannabinoid products are the market, and the cannabis plant and the cannabis flower just happens to be one category within cannabinoid products, right? So our view of the world is that the vast majority of consumers, especially as we become more health conscious, do not want to smoke a plant into their lungs. And they probably don't want to taste something that tastes like pine trees, right? There is a massive market there, but our view is that somewhere between 70 and 90% of the cannabinoid product market goes to extracted products. And what becomes more interesting for us is not using what is in the plant, limonene and all the terpenes and flavonoids that are found within the plant, but starting to take these really interesting molecules and medicines, cannabinoids, and combining those with different terpenes and different flavonoids that are not found in cannabis, making it taste better, giving you different effects and different efficacy. And I think there's a lot of scientific work that we hopefully will unlock and partner with people on as we start to unsee that. So I don't see it as a cannabis market. I see it as a cannabinoid market. I think the vast majority of that market is going to be in different form factors, whether that be patches or drinks or edibles or whatever, or vape pens or whatever that may be. And I think that's where it evolves to over time. I mentioned this earlier, but I also think humans are half to less than half of the overall cannabinoid product market. I think the animal health market is an utterly fascinating area. I'll give you another one besides the dairy farmer. We're actually studying cannabinoids in elephants here at the San Diego Zoo to lower anxiety and see if it could help them with depression and being in those cages. So there's a bunch of really cool research at Colorado State, for instance, in animal health. I'll tell you, the big pet food producers all have cannabinoid products ready to go for older cats and dogs with arthritic conditions. We're seeing a massive market in horses as well to deal with pain in older horses. So I think the animal health market is huge as well. So I think, as we move towards legalization, and everybody's very excited about legalization, we need to keep in mind that with legalization comes regulation. And if you are not prepared as a product company to deal with that regulation, specifically around consistency, quality, and safety of your products, you're going to be behind the 8 ball when technologies like ours come online.
That was a great answer. Okay. Another of the prepared questions. No, well, it wasn't a prepared question. You remember that the last one that we talked about is, can you give us 2 insights, 2 notes, 2 keynotes? We call them golden green seeds for the Mexican market that's about to open. We open up legal, just in the medical supply chain, in the medical market, but we might be fully open in about a month. Maybe Alfonso Romo has some inside information on that. But
unfortunately, I don't talk to Alfonso anymore. I haven't talked to him in years. So unfortunately, I have no insider information for you.
Call him.
What do you see for Mexico specifically?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to what I said about Canadians trying to grow a tropical plant on the tundra. And it also comes back to this idea of international commerce, right? I think Mexico, South America, Asia, and North Africa / the Middle East, and then other tropical climates like Jamaica and some other places are very well suited to become the producers of this product, period. If you think about it, it's really interesting. Wine is a great example here. For decades and centuries, France and Italy dominated the wine market. They just had the best soil, the best conditions to grow the grapes. And then California came in, and we have a pretty good climate here in Northern California with grapes, but we didn't win on climate. We won on technology. We won because our wine producers use science and technology better than anybody else on the planet. And we became a dominant force in that area. And then came Argentina. And Argentina said, wait, we have a great climate. We have effectively free labor. We can grow great grapes. Let's make Argentinian wine. How much Argentinian wine is consumed today? I will tell you, not much relative to California and relative to France and relative to Italy. And that is because there are specific things that people need to be thinking about as they're developing their agricultural portfolio. It's not just your climate. It's not just your labor. It's, are you developing the right intellectual property? Are you developing the right supply chains and agreements globally? Is the Mexican government saying, hey, we want to have trading relationships with some of these other countries, right? So I think there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be put in place. But Mexico is pretty interesting because I will tell you, we worked with Monsanto. Alfonso Romo had a big agricultural technology company that he sold, and that's where he made most of his wealth. Mexico is very forward thinking as it relates to agriculture and agricultural technology. And I think if you focus not on the near term of popping seeds in the ground and just trying to sell plants, but rather focus on the technology in the long game, I think Mexico is extremely well positioned for the agricultural side. I also think extremely well positioned for technologies like ours. Mexico knows how to brew things, whether it's ingredients or beer. I think we would all agree that that is a core competency of the country, of the people, both technically and from a labor perspective. And we view Mexico as one of the better partners potentially for us going forward, just because of that inherent knowledge base that exists within your borders. And the proximity is nice too, right? We're 40 minutes away. We could drive down. Anytime. So I think Mexico is very well positioned, and that's why I was excited to be a part of this event that you guys are putting on.
Okay, Ben, one last question, and this is for both our benefits, Mexico and Ben. You just said you're looking for partners, and the right partner is the half of the business. So, what kind of partner do you need? What kind of partner is the ideal partner in regards to this technology, and that you would ideally find in Mexico?
Yeah, so I would say it's a couple of things, right? So first, any biotechnology company, we always need capital partners, because what we do is very difficult. We have a lab in San Diego. I have a bunch of PhDs on staff. We have a bunch of people we have to pay. Doing the science is expensive. So capital partners, we're always looking for the right capital partners. And actually, a couple of folks hosting this event for you today, Merida being one of them, is a capital partner and a great capital partner to us in that regard. So I would say capital partners, always looking for the right people there. And what I like is people that bring more than a check, people that bring a perspective, people that say, hey, Ben, you're being an idiot. Here's the way we think you should think about the world, and bat those ideas around, because we don't think we know everything, right? Quite the opposite of that. I think I know very little of anything outside of making biology hum and make products. I would say the second one is infrastructure. So I don't have the capital resources to build my own facilities. So if we have contract manufacturing organizations, people that actually have the capital to build infrastructure and say, hey, Ben, we want to be partnered with you and your technology to bring this to market, that is always interesting to us. And then lastly is product companies and innovators, whether they be animal health or pharmaceutical companies or brands. I don't know why Kim Kardashian can sell a product. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know how to build a brand. I don't know why people like Nike over Reebok. Makes no sense to me. I'm just a nerd. So in order for us to actually make an impact on environment and actually make an impact on access to these products, we need those commercial partners, those folks that can actually build a brand, make the products, formulate them so they're bioavailable, put them in form factors that are appealing to customers. We don't want to do that because we're not good at that. We have to know what we're good at, and that is turning cells into manufacturing facilities. So I would say those are the big three buckets for us from a partnership perspective. We're open to any and all conversations. We're open to critiques and people, kind of coming at us. But, all of those things I think are important to us, especially at a company at our stage. Okay.
These are not questions. These are just one. Are you in Clubhouse? Because Pedro Murillo, our official Cannabis Mexico Summit representative in Clubhouse, wants to know and wants to add you and wants to invite you to our Latin American cannabis channel. Yeah. Are you in Clubhouse?
I am on Clubhouse. I'm happy to join. I've done a few of those things. That's a crazy environment on there. How
do we find it? How do we find you in Clubhouse?
It should just be my name. You should be able to look up my name. I can email it to you. I actually don't even know what my username is. I'm not great on the social media like you kids are.
Great. That's one. And the second one, if anyone wants to reach out to you, how do they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best. At Ben Chiarelli is my LinkedIn handle. I'm very active on LinkedIn and Business Perspective. I actually talk very little about myself on LinkedIn. I talk much more about people in my ecosystem and interesting topics. But I'm always super responsive on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me there.
Ben, thank you very much. It was one of the most flabbergasting presentations we've had. What you're doing is amazing, impressive, outstanding. It was truly an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you, my friend. I'm so appreciative and so humbled to be a part of the event. Thank you so much. And I will tell you that I'm not the one doing the craziness. It's the folks in the lab that are doing the actual science. I'm just the ugly face and the mouthpiece on this thing. It's the scientists who are doing all the great work. So,
on behalf of Cannabis Mexico Summit and the more than 100 people that have heard you today and the more than 10,000 that will hear you over the next few days, we thank you again. And
thank you so much, guys. So happy to be a part of it, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Bye-bye.
Bye.